Hi, today I have a conversation with somebody I just met through another podcast episode, Aisha Williams. Welcome, Aisha.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yes, and how this came about was I published an episode with Sebastian Klein the week before, and there you commented, and I went through your LinkedIn profile. And then I thought, oh, that's an interesting topic that you have there. So I invited you.
I'm
And
so happy that you did.
yeah,
Uh, because when I saw that he posted about the Climate Challenge 2021, I was like, well, that's something that I want to focus on.
right.
ImpactVest, right? I'm always brainstorming ways of trying to make more of an impact with my firm, and so I thought this is a great way to start off 2021. So you're first about it.
I'm happy you said yes. And why I'm so happy is because your topic is not very common on my podcast, first of all. And that is finance. And you have a very governmental kind of background. So you are an entrepreneur now, but you come from university, from government. So you have a very different background from what my guests normally have. So it's going to be very interesting to learn about how you got where you are right now. So let's start with something which I didn't understand because I just don't know what it means, and you can explain. Because the first work experience that I see on your LinkedIn profile is US born scholar. What is that?
Yeah, so I was a US born scholar. I still am, and I received this when I was about 20. So I was a sophomore in college back in the US. And basically, we got a scholarship to study abroad. I studied in Brazil, and then we do service for the US government. So I did my service for the Department of Defense for about 8 years. And that's how I got through school. I did my master's, being a born scholar. And what it is an initiative by the US government to be able to study other cultures and countries, to be able to make the US actually uh, more of a multi-ethnic country, that we're more welcoming. And so it started, I think, in the early, maybe 2010, I think 2010, I think the first US born scholars, because there's a real kind of need for the US to get to know the rest of the world on maybe more on a ground level, right? And that, because in general, I think US education tends to be a bit insular in terms of history. And so that was an effort to say, okay, we really need to go out into the world, and we have to really learn about other cultures and languages. But at the same time, when you do that, you start to be able to critically look at your own country, right? And so that's the idea of a born scholar, that we're all students, we're all in the States, but when we spend enough time abroad, you start to pick up aspects of different cultures and countries, and then you start to be able to look at your own country and say, well, this is what we can do better, right? These are There are lots of areas that we need to improve on, like all countries, right? No one's perfect, and so that's where the initiative started in the U.S. I think I was one of the first, but now there are many born scholars and Rhodes scholars. So that was the focus, to go out into the world to really um, learn other cultures and languages, and have it become part of us in the way that we are Americans, but we're also global citizens at the same time, right? So that's where I started, and it was a very interesting journey. Like we were speaking pre-podcast, I was a ballet dancer, and I had lots of injuries, and I was a teenager, about 17, 18. And I said, well, you know, this is not going to work. I don't think a dance career is in my future. And I said, well, what is the thing that I love almost as much as dancing, which is traveling, traveling and learning different languages and studying other cultures. So I went to college, and then I won my scholarship. And then I became a board scholar. So that was my journey. And then the next year I went to Brazil. So
okay, hold on. So okay, a couple of things. What I understood from this is that, so you get money, so you get finance to study abroad.
Right.
And in return, you do service.
Right.
And also you win a scholarship, because there's just so many people that can get this finance, so that you have to win it from all others. And what do you need to do to win this?
So what we have to do is we have to write an essay, and there's a jury. So what we have to say is why we think that this is important for the U.S., right? To be able to make our country a more welcoming country, and really what does it have to do with our values as a country. And so my essay, that actually thinking back on my essay to be a U.S. foreign scholar, all that I've really done is expanded on it in my firm, because my main idea in my essay was this idea of the other, right? When we speak about other countries, other cultures, other languages, what we're actually doing is just putting them in a different category. And actually there is no category. We can speak about different countries, but at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all have the same challenges that we're facing every day. We all have families. So that was the point of my essay, is that if we really do want to speak about how can we advance American culture, or how does it look in the future, we do have to speak about a multi-ethnic country. That is true, but we also have to speak about how we have to stop putting people in the other category. And so that was the basis of my essay, right? That the first thing that we have to look at is that we have to connect to other people on a human level, right? Beyond nationality, beyond language. That's the first thing that we have to do.
Right.
And so that was the basis of my essay, that if we want to speak about learning about different cultures and languages, what we also have to recognize is that when we speak about trying to analyze them in terms of American culture, that we, at the very basis, I believe that we all share similar values. It's just that we express them in different ways depending on where we're from, right? So, and so this was my born essay to win the scholarship. I think there are only about 100 students across the US who win every year. And so I was very surprised to win it. And and then that kind of set off my public service journey. And then I ended my service about 8 years later. and I wanted to stay in the Foreign Service, but I had spent so much time in public service. I won my scholarship at 20, right? I ended at 28. So that was basically all of my 20s. And so I wanted to do something else. I wanted to explore the private sector. And I actually, when I was in Rio, I met a gentleman who worked for a Chinese supplier, and I went to China to work because the trade between China and Brazil was growing. And I was helping them understand South America. They needed a translator, so I went to China from Brazil. I spent about 3 years there, and then I came here to France. So it was quite a journey. But I'm glad you asked about that, because that really was the basis of my essay. And I'm from Chicago, and I think it was very important for me to be able to highlight in my essay to become a foreign scholar how important it is to to really speak to people on a human level and really understand basic values that we all share, because when you're coming from such a multi-ethnic city, that in all of our families, someone came from a different country or is an immigrant, right? And so that was really important for me to say, there are different aspects of being an American, and they're different. If you speak to any one of us, we have vastly, like, a wide way of experience in the country, depending on where we're from and our family background. And so so that was really in my essay, to say what we really need to do is get beyond the categories and really get to who people are on kind of a deep human level, and that can translate across any country that you go to. So that stayed with me right through all of my service. I went to China. I always say that when I have friends who ask me about living abroad, and I say, you know what, I have friends in all different countries, because when you meet people that you like, you just bond. It doesn't really matter what culture or country you're in, right? So that's actually what stayed with me in building ImpactVest, because it's the same idea that when we speak about impact and we speak about sustainability, it goes beyond sectors. I think it's, at least in finance and investment, sometimes it can get very analytical and it can become like its own category. And for me, it is the same idea that when I applied to be a Boren Scholar, that actually I don't think that you can't put things in its own section, or you really have to integrate it within all of finance and all of business, right? But that's difficult too, because I think naturally we like to place things, right? And how do we get beyond this of placing things in a certain section and saying, well, this is the criteria for this, right? So really kind of a blended definition of what exactly is impact. And I think I just did a post on this on LinkedIn, because Jed Emerson has a really good book called The Purpose of Capital that I posted about. And he speaks about this, that blended value proposition, right? And it is this idea of we have to get beyond this binary concept of sustainability and impact and investment, because even the words are separate. We have to think about it all in one word or in one thought or idea. So I'm glad that you asked about my Boren scholarship, because it's the same theme I think that runs through my service, and then traveling and exploring the private sector. This idea that and my background coming from Chicago is that we really have to understand that we have shared values, and it doesn't matter where you're from. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey from government to.
So you've been to South America, to China, to France. I won't say Europe, to France, and what is it that you have now as advice for the US that they can learn from these three countries, cultures that you've been to?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say, and I may get a lot of feedback from this, but is our healthcare system. So being in France, it is an incredible healthcare system here. I do wish that we would adopt this in the US, because I think there's a certain freedom when you don't have to worry about if you get sick, then you're going to go bankrupt, right? You can focus on other things. And I talk to my family in the States, and I tell them, definitely it's much easier having work-life balance, if you want to say this, here in France, and I think it would be in the States. I mean, there are a lot of great things that we have in the US, but I think that our healthcare is something that has to be improved right away, right? Because if you are worried about your health or the health of your family, it makes it hard to progress. It makes it hard to actually build what you want to do, or kind of think about other things that you want to do in your life. So that's the first thing. I think the French healthcare system is great. I do wish that we could, kind of move this model to the US. My experience in China, I have a lot of good friends in China, and it was really there. I was really kind of taken in by my friends' families. I have a really great story about going to one of my friend's weddings in the north of China by Harbin, but she lived in a village like close to the Russian border. And I had worked on my Mandarin. I thought it was pretty good, but it was great just traveling with her. And I really got taken in by my friends' families, and I was treated like family. And I'm really grateful for that. So I think in China, the idea of family and the group is something that is really amazing. I have good friends to this day, and it really made it easier to live there without it. And I went there, I didn't speak any Mandarin, right? I had to learn. I depended on my friends for a lot. Even though I was working with a supplier there and I was teaching in Qingdao, still there were lots of things I didn't understand. Reading in Chinese is very difficult. So my friends helped me a lot. And so, but I think the idea of taking care of the group and looking out for the group is something also that I think that we can benefit from in the US. And so those experiences have really and kind of informed my idea of not only what we can bring to the US, but also this idea of being a global citizen, that I think all countries have something incredible to offer in terms of culture. Mm-hmm. So I think if we find those aspects and we speak about it, I think it can really make all of us more aware of how much we share. When we think about across cultures and even countries, I think this idea of nationality is once you really live in different countries and really learn languages, and language holds a lot of culture also, right? And so when you really start to understand this, it becomes easier to look at your own culture in a more critical way and say, this is what we could really do better, right? And if we did this better, it makes you understand other countries in a more human way, right? And not just say, well, they are French and they're, whatever. So I think that's probably the best lesson I picked up from living across the world is there are shared values that we can definitely apply to our own countries, but I think every country has something to teach us. I think we're like a patchwork, a quilt of things that we can all teach each other, and then we all have to be open to it.
Was there something specific that you learned in Rio de Janeiro?
In terms of what I would like to take.
What you wanted to implement in the US?
So I think that the healthcare was the biggest one.
So it's similar to Europe in Brazil?
Oh, in Brazil, and so in Brazil, it's like my second home. I spent so much time there. I would say it would be Somewhat China. It's the kind of the friendship and the openness, and people are so friendly, and it was the same thing. I literally went from being a freshman in college to going to Brazil and spending most of my time there. So, and all of my friends are really welcoming, and it really is my second home. I have lots of friends, and yeah, I spent most of my kind of school days there, and so, but I think in Brazil, I think it's when we speak about a multi-ethnic culture, right? It's that's kind of that is it. I think that there is such like a kind of a joy to living in Brazil, and such an openness, and it's, I think in general people are so positive, right? And it's just something in the air that you kind of catch on. I have a funny story about having to go back, because as foreign scholars we would have to go back, right? And we were still in school, right? So we had to go back for classes, and I could feel the difference. I know I landed in Miami, and it just felt so kind of quiet. And I was like, oh, okay, you know. So there was kind of something in the air in Brazil. But I was in Rio too, because I went to school in Gavia, for the listeners who are in Brazil. So so also I think Rio is kind of special in the country too. But yeah, definitely I think in terms of just kind of the joy of living and being friendly and being really, really welcoming. I think it's great. But it really is my second home. I think I am looking forward to seeing my friends, and it's
beautiful. So I'm having another issue, not with you, don't worry, with this word impact. I'm using it a lot as well. I want to help entrepreneurs that have a positive impact on the world, that want to change the world in a better way. But when I use this word, I get often the question, what do you mean? What is that impact? So how would you explain, because you are interested in investing in people, entrepreneurs, companies that make impact. What is your definition, or what are your points that you say, okay, a company has to fulfill these when they make enough impact for you to invest in them? What is impact?
Yeah, I think I think the first thing is that companies can have negative and positive impact. And so when we speak about impact, it's really about what is their end goal, or what do they want to achieve with their company, right? If you have a company that says, you know, we really want to help women entrepreneurs achieve this goal, right? So that's a clear goal in impact, right? That's really integrated into the business model. And so that's really what I'm speaking about. And I think in the impact space in general, that's the definition. Because impact, again, when we make an investment, there can be positive or negative impact, and it can sometimes be like, if you have a company who is being analyzed for their materiality, or kind of the climate change effects on their portfolio or supply chain, that's a negative effect on that company. But that is an impact, right? And so in kind of the impact investment space, it's speaking about positive impacts, but also having a clear impact focus in your business model, in your firm. What do you want to achieve? What is the end goal? Who is being affected at the end? So that's the focus. And so it's not this binary notion of if you have impact and investment, it's about, well, how is impact integrated throughout the business and throughout the firm, right? And that's really what I'm speaking about. And I do think it's the evolution in the impact space. We really have to think about investment or even creating a business from the very beginning. When you create the firm, how is it going to be sustainable? How is it going to benefit your clients or your stakeholders or your customers, right? From the very beginning. So when you create your business or your firm, you are thinking about the positive impact on your stakeholders. So that's really it. But this is, I would say, it's an evolution in the impact space, because it has been thought of as, well, we want to be able to speak about ESG and we want to be able to quantify it in some way. And that is true. I think we have to be able to quantify it, but at the same way, it really has to be integrated into the business itself. And so it guides every transaction and every interaction with a stakeholder. And so that's the definition of impact that I'm speaking of. And in the impact space, that's kind of what we're talking about, is really that blended value of when we speak to customers, when we create products, when we launch services, how is that person being affected? Is it going to be in a positive way? Is it a negative way? But to think about it, right? And to consciously think about, well, if it's negative, how can I improve that? Or how can I turn it into a positive? Because I think it's not enough of being conscious of what the effects are, right? Even if there's a firm that says they're a sustainable firm, and these are their products that they have launched in the sustainability space, but what are the actual effects of the choices that they're making for their stakeholders? Are they doing it in a way that will create positive outcomes for them in the end and will create impactful outcomes for them in a way that benefits their lives or their businesses and their stakeholders, right? And so it's about impact integration, which is what I'm exploring in my firm. When we speak about impact investing and sustainability, it should actually be from the very beginning of creating a firm in every transaction. Also, when if we're going to speak more on the finance side, because right. It's still very much thought of different categories of investment, and so it's really the evolution of it, of the definition.
So what I also hear a lot is that you mentioned stakeholders a lot instead of shareholders. Is that also a point that as a company who wants to make an impact, a positive impact, you focus on all stakeholders instead of just on the shareholder?
Well, I think it's important to focus on all stakeholders. And like we were speaking about before with ImpactVest, I really want to make my team into partners, right? I think it's important, if we just speak about shareholders, we automatically get into the paradigm of, well, we have to think about the return for shareholders, right? And that's natural because we have the financial model framework that we've all learned and that our system is based on. So I would say the challenge is to, we have our financial model framework of shareholders, but we also have to expand the definition of, well, how do we actually serve the needs of all of our stakeholders? and we actually think about the return on investment in a different way. And it's really changing the paradigm of it, which actually goes into changing the financial models that our system is based upon. So what I'm essentially speaking of is evolving the financial models to include an idea of impact within the financial model. I made a post about this on LinkedIn about just a concept of the time value of money, right? And I said, well, there's probably a time value of impact, but no one speaks about this, right? That you can have impact momentum, just like capital, right? And so this is what I'm saying, that I think we can take the financial models and that we can improve upon them and we can iterate on them, right? Because they're living things. And I think that we've thought about them as they're kind of static. And so there's a static financial model, and then we're kind of layering on sustainability and impact, which is essentially ESG, right? So we're saying, okay, this is our static model. And now we're going to layer on a metric of ESG and we're going to quantify it. Okay, that's okay, but we still have a model that hasn't changed, right? We've just added on ESG there, right? And so there has to be some kind of integration or some kind of iteration of the financial models themselves. And these are theories that, that we haven't made yet, but I'm just, that I think is where the impact space is going. I think until we consider things like there might be a time value of impact, there might be a lot of ways within the financial model that we can integrate how impact is thought of, and then we can apply that to a company when you do financial valuation, for example, right? We can actually start to get to the base of, well, how actually within the financial system can we integrate impact? And this is what I'm really interested in, because any kind of business or firm, it's all built on the same framework. And so I do think that the framework itself has to evolve,
right,
to include a more expansive definition of impact.
Well, first, ESG, maybe not everybody knows it, environmental, social, and corporate governance, right?
Right.
Just to be sure that everyone understands what that means. And you talk about our financial system that we have. Is it, because I think there are at least, there's more than just one, right? So, of course, there's a lot of focus on the US kind of financial system, the Anglo-Saxon, what is it?
Anglo-Saxon.
Anglo-Saxon, right? That's the word I'm looking for. And then you have the, for example, what's more is common in the Netherlands and Germany, there's the Rhineland model, where already we look at the shareholders, the stakeholders. So there are models out there already in the world. There have been for a long time already in the world, where we just don't focus on and shareholders just as a pure financial way of looking and evaluating companies and entrepreneurs and people. And the interesting part, of course, is that somehow just in like 50 or 60 years, no, it was 1970, just in 50 years or so, we were able to change this whole financial system into such a big focus of the shareholder, where in the end, the environment or the people or the community struggled and felt the negative impact of this focus on shareholders. So that's an interesting topic, that part of this vision that really I think is important to look at. So what can we do, according to your opinion and everything that you've seen, and you're traveling right now, to go more to that other system when it's already around, when it's already available?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And speaking about Europe, I do think in Germany and the Netherlands, I think the idea of sustainability is probably one of the most advanced. I just got my certification from the Frankfurt School of Management for this reason, and but I think that in order to shift the system more towards impact, it has to start on the individual level. When we speak about maybe the circular economy, right? Taking more care in what we use, waste. So we can speak on the macro level, but it really starts with the individual, and it really starts just being conscious of what we use and what we spend and what we spend it on, and then that translates into the models changing, right? I do think that there is now ESG is really becoming the norm, and there's not a focus on just financial returns as the primary focus. But I still think that we can shift the model, but until we have enough individual activities changing in terms of even kind of what we buy and why we buy it, and I do think that there has to be a change on that level, just the individual level, and it is coming. I do think that this COVID crisis has accelerated it, because now we really see that we're all interconnected, right? We don't live in a bubble. So I do think that investment in green tech and the environment and climate change and will really accelerate because of this crisis. But other than that, I do think it has to, right, there does have to be a change on the level of the individual and of the firm also in business, and on why is someone launching a business, and but it's getting there. I do think that there is a consciousness that wasn't there before, in terms of it is really necessary to do as much as we can to solve climate change and to mobilize capital towards these initiatives.
Okay. What do you think is the role? No, that's not the right word. What kind of role could the government play in this?
Oh, I think they can play a huge role. I think about the EU taxonomy, which I do think that the government has a very important role to play, because like the EU taxonomy, and even here in France, they are able to set criteria and to set mandates for private companies. This is a bit harder to implement in the US, but I think that's needed, because of the idea that there should be the least amount of government influence possible in the private sector. That is the debate, and I do think that's the challenge to implement green sector initiatives. But with the current administration, it will be possible. It would be great if we had something like a taxonomy in the US also, because the government plays a large role in this, just like the EU taxonomy. There do have to be certain guidelines that if you have a firm that you can follow, and that you can see that, okay, this is the level or the criteria that I need to accomplish. But I do think it's coming in the U.S. I think there's a Green Deal that's going to be launched, but I do think that here in Europe is really kind of setting the pace for that, because because even when we speak about the ESG indices, it's all voluntary. And so companies can voluntarily disclose you know, how they're following the metrics in terms of ESG. So whenever it's a private sector initiative, it's a great initiative, right? When you have private sector ESG indices in private companies, but when you add the government criteria to it to make it mandatory, I think next month, for example, all asset managers have to disclose the ESG criteria that they're using in portfolios here in the EU. You know, so that adds another level of compliance that I do think is needed, because when it's a voluntary, we tend to fall into this role of, okay, well, we maybe will not disclose some information that might hurt our bottom line, or our shareholders may not like this, right? Yeah, but that also, I think, is a big debate in the U.S. But I do think that a taxonomy is needed in the U.S. like it is here in Europe. But on the other hand, that does mean that there's more government criteria and compliance over private companies, which is where the debate is.
So coming back to your, you mentioning that you think that it has a lot to do with how we personally also are into this, right? So that we have to make conscious decisions of what we buy and how we use it and so on. Also, I think, and I'm bringing this up just to have a conversation about this, right? I'm not attacking you. So for example, if you're looking at the food, right? So if you're looking at meat or anything like grain or vegetables, there is huge companies, conglomerates, huge companies in the world that have so much power that they are only interested in increasing their revenue and profit. And what they do is they have these, like Mariana Mazzucato mentions, have these backroom deals with the government for, you know, taxating other stuff and not their stuff. And for example, if you're looking at the meat industry, I just looked at a documentary on by the Deutsche Welle, which is on YouTube. And it talks about why is meat so cheap, right? So if we put it into the hands of the individual, then what in general happens is that we talk with our wallets, right? So when we have vegetables that come from our own country, so there's less travel, so the produce is at the right timing, with the seasons, everything fits and has the least economic impact on the world compared to importing stuff from either, you know, India or South America or anywhere, just because we want to have this full range of choice on vegetables. And the same with meat, right? You can have either no meat or meat which is less meat, but now meat is so cheap that the consumer just buys more because it's cheap and it tastes good when you put enough seasoning on it. It tastes really well, so it's a good. And we just see increase of meat while we should be decreasing it, and we can see now in practice, my opinion, that it's very difficult to put it in the hand of the consumer because we are just bombarded with all this marketing and PR and communications telling us that we need to eat more and eat this really delicious stuff instead of thinking about our health and thinking about the environment. So what do you think that we could do as individuals, but also as governments, apart from taxation, to speed this process up, to make the consumer more wise about these decisions, and also to make, for example, to have a fair price, right? So to have fair pricing on products so that we can see that the impact, the negative impact of what we are producing is included in the price of the product, so that we know a piece of meat doesn't cost like €2, but it costs like €10, because that's the actual price that we should be paying.
Right. Yeah, and so those are great points. I do think when we speak about the government, there has to be some kind of accountability for companies in terms of climate change and food, and being able to inform consumers, although maybe in the short term, they may look at it as it hurts their bottom line, right? If they sell less meat. But there has to be an accountability there, and that's where the government comes in, because I do think it'll only be by maybe forced mandatory disclosures, because again, our financial system is set up still to earn the most profit and to put the shareholders first. I mean, when we speak about even business school education, it's still very much like this. I think in terms I think until we look at that, until we look at what are we learning in business schools, what are we actually, what are we learning as a society? Because we can't really kind of blame big companies if all the executives have received the same education, which is our standard education, our financial education, right? So it really comes from that framework of what are we learning? So you can't tell executives who have learned a standard financial well, not only financial education, but they're rewarded for the highest returns for their shareholders, right? There's a reward in the financial system for it. And so if that continues to happen, there is really no incentive for them to offer better quality meat at higher prices that hurt their bottom lines. There's no incentive because the financial system itself hasn't changed. And so in some ways we have sustainability, we have impact, but the education system is far behind, right? We're actually not teaching it, and it is not the main focus of a lot of business schools. I'll say that. And the system that we live in right now doesn't incentivize it. So until those frameworks change, I think the only way to get the change that we want to see in terms of food quality is it has to come from government, because the education for consumers, again, has to come from the ground level. But I do think Generation Z behind me are more conscious of this, right? They are probably the generation who they don't see a trade-off between maybe paying a bit higher and better quality. So maybe that's what it takes. It just does take time, right? And just the consciousness of it growing over time, because it is starting, right? They are making different choices, but they aren't the top executives yet, right? So I think until they get to those levels in 20, 30, 40 years, it's a gradual change toward seeing that we really do. Yeah, we do have to eat less meat, and we have to be aware of our footprint, right?
Right.
But again, those things in the broader financial system, they're not incentivized, and until they are, it is going to continue to be a struggle between, well, how do we get these big companies to recognize this and not go after profits that they're rewarded for? Because, right, like if we just look at Wall Street, if we look at this, like things, a whole lot of things in the financial system really haven't changed on a fundamental level. And so we can speak about sustainability and impact but then the financial system really is, you know, it's the same models, right? And so that's why I speak about really looking at the models themselves. Why is profit still the number one criteria? I mean, so yeah, we have more ESG and kind of standards and metrics, but at the same time, it's been layered on top of a pretty static financial system whose models haven't changed, right? But that takes a change in thinking. It takes a change in education mostly, right? So those are the models that have to change.
So, okay, you have been studying, traveling, learning abroad, and also bringing the knowledge back to the US. How will you now impact with ImpactVest, this system? How can you change and lay down the first stepping stones for the new way of thinking?
Yeah, so the idea for ImpactVest actually came from my wealth management training at the University of Zurich in the Center for Sustainable Finance and Private Wealth. And it was there, you know, when we were speaking about speaking to clients based on sustainable values, that I got the idea of actually, if we start with sustainable values and we start with speaking about positive impact and real impact for businesses and firms, and then we build a framework and models around that, then we can start to mobilize private capital towards sustainability, right? Starting with values first and sustainable values first. And this is my idea, which is why I speak about, you know, my firm as a sort of exploration of impact, right? Which is, you know, I started with my firm as an advisory, and there are about 4 or 5 of us, and then the app linking pre-seed startups to impact investors, and I'm working on at the moment. But these are all different perspectives on how do we actually integrate impact and sustainability into business models, and how do we start with sustainable values first and build a framework around that, because the overarching main thing that I'm concerned about is the financial models, and how, if we don't address how to integrate sustainability and impact into the model itself, how can we move forward, right, toward the 2030 SDGs? So how do we actually build a financial system that is already built on impact and built on sustainability from the very beginning? And this is a huge idea to think about, right? Because we're speaking about the framework of all of our systems itself. And so what's really interesting for me in ImpactVest is to think about, well, how can we integrate being impactful in investment and into business model integration? And how do we explore this concept of thinking about sustainability values first and positive impact first, and thinking about what is going to be the impact for the stakeholders? Why are you in business, or why are you doing this project? What is the purpose, right? To think about purpose, to think about values, and to start with that, right? And then building the business framework around that, right? So, and even investment, to start with values and start with purpose, and then to build a portfolio around this, right? So just the starting point is different, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the idea for my firm. It really is an exploration of impact that is exciting for me, and I'm just approaching it in different ways through my advisory firm and through the app that I'm building. And I'm excited for other impact initiatives that I'm sure I'll launch. But that is the idea. It comes from being a born scholar, and then being in China, then being here in France, and traveling around Europe, and really seeing the different ways that countries address impact and sustainability. Speaking about China, they were, I think, the first to have sustainability and taxonomies in China. So that has all gone into the creation of my firm. Well, how do we actually look at our whole system itself? How do we change perspectives? When I think about ImpactVest, it really is just redefining what it means to invest and what it means to build a business and to build frameworks. To go a little bit deeper into it and to say, well, our starting point has to change. And like we spoke about at the beginning, I think it's important to start with values first, and then say, okay, what are your values? What is your purpose in building this business or firm? And then you can go from there, because profits will come from that. But I think that profits come from giving value to someone else, and to see the positive impact that you make on your stakeholders, and then it naturally just comes, right? And so that's what I'm interested in. But it really is going into the idea of integrating impact into the frameworks themselves.
Mm-hmm. So you give advice to companies to do this?
Yes, through the firm, right?
So your business, so your values are clear. You want to focus and bring more impact to companies, and you charge by giving advice.
Yeah, and so the sustainable finance and advisory arm of ImpactVest is speaking to clients about their businesses, their firms. How do we make it more sustainable, more impactful, but really looking at integrating sustainability and impact throughout the business, right? Looking at every aspect of the business operations, the supply chains, right? And so we're looking at the business model, and we're saying, well, how can we actually be more sustainable and impactful in this space, in your business? And so even speaking to clients and the products or services that a firm is launching, right? There's spaces there that a firm can be more impactful, maybe in the language, maybe in their end goal. So that's the sustainable finance advisory arm of ImpactVest, which again, it's this exploration of, well, you have a business and you want it to become more sustainable, but actually it should be, we shouldn't even say it's a sustainable business. It should just be a business that we think of as sustainable, because it should be that, right? And so
should be the default,
right? And so that's where we're trying to get at, is if you like come to us as a firm, we want to say, well, you should really just think about the business model itself as impactful, right? Of how do you speak to clients, or kind of what suppliers are you contacting to build your products? What is their track record, right? And so it's really kind of thinking about all aspects of the business and saying, okay, we're not only a sustainable business, but we're very firmly in the framework of sustainability throughout the business model. So
right. So who are your typical clients?
So we actually started out with working with brokers in the US who have portfolios and clients who they want to introduce to impact investors, that they just wanted to receive more education on ESG and sustainability to be able to go to their portfolio clients and make them more sustainable in order to get impact investing, right? And so that kind of made, those were kind of our first couple of clients. And then, you know, now we're working with a few nonprofits who want to either launch a few impact initiatives, right? And who want the framework and the models to be able to do it, right?
So the first part that you mentioned is by being at these brokerage firms, that's really at the core of the whole financial system, right?
Really is. And that was very interesting starting off there. And actually today, most of our clients are brokers. It was really interesting. I didn't think that that would be the focus, but it has, it's been great working with our clients, because again, I am interested in remobilizing capital and being able to be at the core, and being where, you know, being at the core of saying, well, you know, we have portfolios. I think they have maybe portfolios of 30, 50 million, right? But at the same time, they wanted to know the frameworks of sustainability to be able to go to their portfolio companies and to help them pivot towards sustainability. So I do think if we want to talk about change in the financial system, it starts with the brokers and speaking to Wall Street, and because we are speaking about capital, and we're speaking about mobilizing capital and private equity. And if we don't get them on board, it's going to be very, very difficult to solve our challenges and the SDGs. It can't all come from the government. And this was something also I was interested in finishing my service, because it was very clear to me that government that was not going to make enough of an impact to solve the challenges that we face in the world. I mean, it really has to come from the private sector, especially from private equity. So there really does have to be, I would say, ESG, sustainability, impact education. And I speak on the education level because it just, the frameworks and the models that we know very well, especially here in Europe or in the sustainability and impact space, surprisingly, it hasn't gotten to private equity enough, right? It's still very much in ESG metrics, maybe speaking about, the main companies like Morningstar, Sustainalytics, okay, but really speaking about frameworks and models and impact integration, those are very new concepts, but that's where it has to hit, right? It has to hit in the broker space. It has to hit in those spaces so that we can really start to see capital being mobilized towards sustainability, right? So it was actually great to start off in that space because I feel like we're making a whole lot of progress too.
How did you get those first clients?
It was just by chance. They actually reached out to us. So and then we got referred to other clients in the space. So we weren't looking for them. They just reached out and said we're interested in.
But how did they find you?
Sustainability. They actually contacted my senior partner through LinkedIn. So it's a great resource, right? But yeah, so they reached out to us because we didn't think that we would be working with brokers. But it's proved to be a space that I feel like we're making a real impact because there is a need that is coming from the broker space of saying, hey, we want to learn more about sustainability. We have these huge portfolios that we're managing, but we want to get into the impact space, right? And so it's a great opportunity to do mobilization of capital on a very large scale, right? Even if you work with a couple of brokers, you're already affecting hundreds of millions of dollars or euros, right? So that's been very interesting. So yeah, it was just that they reached out to us, and we were like, oh, yeah, we'll see how it how it goes. But that's also, I think, when we speak about sustainability and impact, we actually do have to speak about those spaces, about, well, what about the broker space? What about portfolio management, right? We have to kind of get into those spaces and start talking about sustainability and impact models also.
Mm-hmm. What you talked about the app. What is your app going to do?
And so the app was what my first idea for ImpactVest, which came from my wealth management training, which was connecting pre-seed startups to impact investors based on the SDGs, right? Based on their sustainability values. So again, kind of coming from my wealth management training of speaking to clients based on the SDGs and then building a portfolio around that. So that I wanted to translate into an app. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, because I thought it was such a great idea to start with sustainability values first, and yeah. So I'll see how that goes also. But I do think that there does have to be more of a focus of when you have startups who are looking for investment, to connect with investors based on their sustainability values first, and based on the SDGs that they align themselves with, right? And so that's the idea of the app, which is just another way that I'm exploring this idea of impact investing, but integrating impact into the business model and into investment itself, and starting with sustainability values first.
Right. So in your LinkedIn profile, in the head, you have this image of the global impact, sustainable impact values. So there is like 17, right?
So there are 17 SDGs, right?
Right. So this is a personal question. So which one is the most important to you of those 17?
That's a good question. I think, well, of course, gender equality is very important for me, and education is very important. I mean, I think they're all very important, but I would say education, because just like what we were speaking about, changing business models and making these larger corporates aware of their accountability in terms of food quality. I always think about education. I do think if we made a focus in our educational system on sustainability and impact, and this is throughout primary education, university, master's, business school, so throughout the system, we would actually start to see a shift in what firms value, because at the end of the day, we're all people in our businesses, and we all come with our own values and our own backgrounds. So that's important for me. I do think that if we really analyze the educational systems and the models that were being taught and kids are being taught, then we will start to see progress in the other SDGs, right? But until that's addressed, it's hard to make progress in the others, because it takes a fundamental shift in thinking that only comes from education, right?
Right. So. Okay, actually, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I want to talk a lot more with you about this, because I think it's a very interesting field, and I think the last question I asked you was kind of unfair, because I don't even know what would be the most important one.
That's a great question, though. I mean, when we look at the SDGs, I mean, every single one is really important. But then they all take investment, right? When we speak about clean energy and clean water and food security. So you know, so we have to think about like where is the investment going to come from
Right.
for these, and so that's what I'm interested in too. We know it has to come from private equity. Okay, so if it has to come from the private sector and private equity, how do we get them to invest? Which comes to frameworks and models, which comes to education. So there's so many underlying factors there. That have to be addressed in order to reach the 2030 SDG goals. So yeah, but you know, we're what, nine years away. So it's but I think that in order to kind of start to find the solutions for the SDGs, I do think that there has to be a focus on impact integration throughout the financial system, right? And going back to education, because even when I think about my own education, yeah, it started back in college, but I do think through government really being on the ground level, and I did a lot of education initiatives in South America and Brazil, and then working in China, and then getting certified here in Europe. And I've been able to be educated throughout the world and see many different perspectives. I do think that has to be more of a focus, because if, you know, who knows who is going to be the next top executive of a big firm. They might be, you know, 6 years old today. Like we don't know, right? And so it really comes from going into the school system, going into the education system, and teaching these values and throughout the system. And so I do think, you know, when we speak about the SDGs, there does have to be a massive mobilization of capital toward investment, and how do we achieve this, because they're not going to be able to be solved without private equity really realizing that the models that they're using have to be modified in some way.
Right. I also think there's, next to the private equity, is of course the funds from the government. At the same time, it's both ways, and even though the companies are still shouting that they want less governmental influence because they know better, I think I'm more into the corner of Maria Mazzucato, where the influence of government is important. They need to have regulations, taxations, whatever is necessary to, you know, for example, like companies like Amazon, they ship their products on roads that were built by other people, and that's really not included in the price of what they are doing right now, for example. Or Apple is using technology that was invented by the government, or at least funded by the government, and mostly military. So there's so many things. I think it's a very, it needs to walk together, right? It needs to be partnered hand in hand to walk together, and both look at these issues that you just mentioned. I really enjoyed talking to you and learning more about this, because it is a topic that is weirdly close to my heart, because I'm saying weirdly because I never thought that this was such an important topic on so finance, on, you know, creating more impact. So I love that you were here. Thank you, Aisha, for that. And hopefully I can invite you again once you have a new white paper, or once your app is running. I'd love to invite you again to tell us more about that too. So thank you. Before we close it up, where can people find you? Where can they get in contact with you?
Okay, so I'm active on LinkedIn, and they can just go on my profile, and I have the link to ImpactVest and the advisory, and I have spaces open on my calendar every week that I love speaking to new people, and so they can just book a session with me, and we can speak about sustainability and impact, or whatever's on their mind. I really want ImpactVest to be an effort, from many, many different sectors. I love meeting people from all different sectors and all different areas. And so I actually leave hours open every week, just to speak to people who want to speak about what I'm doing and who are interested. And so, yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm excited to be on this journey of building and sustainability and impact, and really, really thinking about new models for how to go forward. Yeah, but it has been so nice to speak with you, and I'd be happy to come back and speak about my progress, and because it's definitely very interesting. I actually am having a lot of fun learning how to build an app, coming from wealth management and government. So it's great. And then working with my clients and building my team. And that's another thing I think about building a business. It should be interesting. It should be fun. It should be something that, like, you're passionate about. And I really do want to be part of the process of making real impact in the world in some way, of funding an entrepreneur who maybe could not get funding in any other way, or when we speak about brokers in the US, and that they get a new idea and then they help their portfolio company. And so yeah, I am excited about being in this space, and I would love to come back and share with you about our progress.
Great. Okay, there's one thing I'm curious about. ImpactVest, does it have a website?
Yeah, and so I was actually working on the advisory first, and so that now I have to build the parent company website, because I have to structure it.
Okay.
Correctly.
No, that's because it's what you can see that I'm always interested in marketing as well. So you found your first clients through LinkedIn, and I looked at your profile on LinkedIn, and I looked for your website, which I couldn't find. So you see so many companies just being so focused, for example, on building their website even before maybe even their values, right? And you've done this so differently. That's why I'm asking. That's why I think it's interesting to learn how there's different ways to to do this, to start building a business. You don't have to use a website. You don't have to have everything perfectly in order to start getting your first clients. Just be open and listen and just talk to people, right?
Well, I think what helped us too is that my team, we're all certified in our different areas, and so I actually started with the advisory, and then the app, and then I had to think of how to structure this, because I was first thinking about just one company, and then I thought, actually I have to build a parent company, and then I have to build subsidiaries so that I can exit out of the app, and then I can keep the parent company. So I've had to structure it also, right? And that takes time, but it was actually just, it came from getting clients first, and then building a team, and then focusing on the advising, and like really having to legally structure it. That is something also that's probably very important to think about, the structure of your company, because I didn't think I would be building a parent company and subsidiaries, but that's what I'm building. Just because because I'm thinking about not only just a company, but a way of redefining investment that is beyond one company. I'm just approaching it from different ways, from the app and firm and my clients, and I think that I really do want to keep exploring impact in a way that can be kind of under the parent company of ImpactVest, but I don't know where it's going to go. But because I do have the business school education, I knew I needed to exit the app. So we actually still have our framework. But yeah, so there is no right way to do it. I mean, yeah, but I actually didn't know that I would be building a parent company and subsidiaries. I didn't know that until I got clients for the advisory firm, and then was building the app team at the exact same time. And then I realized actually these have to be two different companies. And then if they're two different companies, I have to make a parent company. So there is no right way to do it. So yeah, we have a website for the advisory firm, and I have to make the website for the parent company. But I had to think about the parent. So I had to think about the structure before I launched the website. So that was important. But I think it's important to be open to how it may change depending on what comes to you, because I definitely did not think I would be building subsidiaries. I didn't think so. But I think that's important, because the structure that you start out with, you have to really get it right, because it becomes harder as you go on.
Right.
So yeah.
Once again, thank you very much, Aisha, and talk to you later.
Okay, thank you.